to Reggie Ann. Here we go. Start the show. 1 and 2 and 3 and.
All right, good morning, Okaview Middle School students and staff. Welcome to our annual Memorial Day Assembly. This Memorial Day Assembly is an Okaview tradition which has now been in place for 27 years. Even during the pandemic, we found a way to keep this tradition alive. The purpose of our time together this morning is to provide a brief history of why we celebrate the holiday, and through selected readings, music selections, and shared messages, honor and remember those who have sacrificed so much for us. Before we start, I would like to recognize those that made this morning possible. Thank you to our band, orchestra, and choir students for their performances this morning. Thank you, students. Thank you to our student readers and performers. Thank you to QCTV for their partnership. Thank you to Mr. Hubner and our custodial staff for the setup. Thank you to Ms. Grapevine, Mrs. Pavot, and Mr. Blees for the musical selections. And a special thank you to Mr. Blees for his efforts in planning our morning today. This event isn't possible without Mr. Blees' leadership. So thank you to our staff. Thank you, Mr. Blees. A brief history. Memorial Day was officially proclaimed on May 5, 1868 by General John Logan, National Commander of the Grand Army of the Republic, and was first observed on May 30th, 1868. On this day, flowers were placed on the graves of Union and Confederate soldiers at Arlington National Cemetery. By the end of the 19th century, Memorial Day ceremonies were being held on May 30th throughout the nation, and in 1971, Memorial Day was declared a national holiday by Congress. At that same time, it was determined to recognize this holiday on the last Monday in May. On this day, multiple ceremonies are held at cemeteries across the country. Speeches are given honoring those who have given their lives for our country. Wreaths are laid to commemorate their sacrifice, and taps are played to honor their service. A focus for this morning, students, for the next 30 minutes or so, I ask that you focus your attention on the music, shared readings, and on our guest's message this morning. I know that you're capable of showing the utmost respect during this important assembly. At this time, I invite Derek Esselman forward to lead our school in the Pledge of Allegiance. Immediately after the pledge, the band will perform the Star-Spangled Banner. I invite all audience members to stand and remain standing through the national anthem.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce our readings for the morning. First, we will hear a portion of President Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address by Lily Bass and Finley Mahoney. Following this selection, Ellie Neitzel will share in Flanders Field.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this.
But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little know, nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what we did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus so far nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here the great dedicated task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
In Flanders field the poppies blow, between the crosses row on row that mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders field. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you from failing hands we throw, the torch be yours to hold it high, if ye break faith with us who die. We shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders field.
All right, next I would like to introduce the following musical selections. Honor and Glory, performed by the 8th grade orchestra under the direction of Mrs. Pavot. Thank You Soldiers, performed by our 8th grade choir under the direction of Ms. Grapevine. And Marches of the Armed Forces, performed by our 8th grade band under the direction of Mr. Blease. position. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for this morning. Captain Christopher De La Forest was commissioned a second lieutenant in the United States Army after graduating from St. John's University through the ROTC program. Commissioned in the Armor Branch, he served as a tank platoon leader, reconnaissance platoon leader, and battalion staff officer in units assigned to the 18th Airborne Corps in Fort Knox, Kentucky, and was honorably discharged as a captain in 1996. After active duty service, he served in units in the Minnesota Army National Guard and the Army Reserve. He earned a bachelor's degree in political science and is a graduate of the University of Minnesota Law School. After being elected to 3 terms in the Minnesota House of Representatives, he founded and leads De La Forest Consulting, which is a political affairs and government relations advisory firm. Chris has been married to Mrs. Karen De La Forest for over 30 years, and they have 2 sons who attended Okaview Middle School and are now in college. In his free time, he enjoys hunting, traveling, and watching the Twins, Vikings, and Wild. Please join me in welcoming our guest speaker, Captain De La Forest.
Good morning. I've got a nice long speech, but you're getting out of class, right? So it's all good. No, on a serious note, thank you very much. I'm grateful to be here and just share a couple of remarks with you about the importance of Memorial Day. And you heard that mentioned just before, that it's an important day that's about a subset of veterans. It's not a day to thank veterans. Veterans have their own day, which is called Veterans Day, which happens later in the year. So we take a moment to remember people who died in service of our country, right? Who made the ultimate sacrifice. What you heard in part of the Gettysburg Address, the last full measure, is what President Lincoln called that. And so I tried to think, how do we put a number on this, right? How does it become real to us? And I did a little bit of math, because you can't find the number, but by my math, I added it up. Over 15,000 Minnesotans have died in service of our country, going back to the Civil War, right? 1858, Minnesota became a state. 1861, the Civil War broke out, and the first Minnesotans gave their lives for our country. I also thought a little bit about any direct ties we might have, and I had remembered when I served in the legislature a Marine from the Andover area who had died in Iraq, and I found a news article, and I'm not going to read it, but he was Staff Sergeant Kenneth Pospisil, who was a graduate of Anoka High School, and as I mentioned, he died in Iraq. And I think they interviewed his mother, and I think this quote says a lot about what that means, not only for those who have fallen in service of our country, but really the families they leave behind, right? And his mom said this: "We all expect our children to come home. It's hard." And so that gives you an idea of the kind of sacrifice that people make so we can have freedom. And what exactly does that mean, right? What does that mean for you? Is it more than just being here one day a year to celebrate? Well, I shouldn't say celebrate, to remember. What does that mean? And I think the best way to think about that is it's really a gift. This gift has been given to you by people we've never met, some people who lived long before we did, and they gave us this incredible gift of their life. And so what does the gift really mean for you as you're sitting here on a Friday, getting ready for holiday weekend? School year is almost over, summer vacation's almost here. Lots of good stuff. And I think, again, think about it as a gift. It's a gift to you, it's a gift to me, and we take it for granted because it's easy. The gift means that you get to get up every day, and you get to live in peace, and you get a lot of freedom, and you don't have to worry about a lot. All of you, I know, in some way know about what's happening in Ukraine right now, where Russia has invaded Ukraine, and a lot of young men and women your age get up in terror every day. They wonder if a bomb is going to fall on their house or on their school. They don't have that peace. It reminds me of my own grandfather, who was a war refugee. He was about 8 years old when his family fled Europe and came to America. And he came to this country he didn't know, and a language he didn't know, but he got away from that terror. So it's a gift, and I think that's really important to remember. It's a gift. But when we have a gift, what do we do with the gift, right? We got to do more than just remember. I think ceremonies like this are incredibly important to remember. We should always remember what this gift that has been given to us, but we have to do more. And what do I mean by that? So we remember the gift, but we have to act on the gift. We have to value that gift. We have to take action, right? This gift can go away. The gift can become less valuable over time. It sort of gets passed on from generation to generation. And unfortunately, I don't think the gift is done being paid for. We know that, unfortunately, conflict and war and America's involvement is something that's not going to go away. And so how do we honor the gift? Well, we honor the gift by participating in community and being active. It isn't just, for example, you're too young right now, but serving in the military at the right time. That may be something you're called upon to do, that you feel in your heart, and the nation needs good men and women to serve our country. But it can start today. I think it starts really today with all of you honoring the gift by taking action. And what does that mean? It means being a part of your community and helping, because when you help others, when you help your community without asking for anything in return, you help your state, you help the country. We're a constitutional republic that really is founded on this idea of being united and working together. And there's so many voices today on social media telling you otherwise, right? Making you mad about things, telling you America isn't this great country. Not perfect, but it is a great country. And so social media is not real, right? I just need to mention that, by the way. Not everybody's as good looking and rich and thin and everything else as what social media portrays it to be. And in the same way, the bad talk about our country is the same. So do what you can to help your community right now. You can do that. It reminds me of a story. I'll tell you one story about this. When I was in high school, I went to a small Catholic high school where I had trouble following the rules when I was younger. I was in trouble a bit, and when you got in trouble at my high school, you didn't serve detention, or I don't know what they do at Okaview these days to you if you break the rules around here. But what they did at my high school is you got assigned work, and because it was a church-based school, people who were sick or elderly or needed help would call the parish office and say, hey, I need some help shoveling my driveway. And then people like me would get assigned to go shovel the driveway. And so one day I was in trouble. I probably deserved it, and I was with my friend Bill. And we got assigned to go to Mrs. Anderson's house to rake leaves. Mrs. Anderson needed help. She lived on Sycamore and Rice, right off there in St. Paul. If anybody's familiar with that, I still remember the house to this day. And so sure enough, it was like late November. All the leaves had fallen. It was a huge lot with lots of big trees. There were a lot of leaves. And of course, it was November. Did I bring a jacket? No. Did I have gloves? No. Did I have a hat? No. So I sat out there and suffered raking those darn leaves. And wouldn't you know it, Mrs. Anderson needed a lot of help, and that worked out because I was frequently available to help out after school. And so I went to Mrs. Anderson's quite a bit to help out. But what I didn't realize is that a lot of times I'd get kind of put off by it because it didn't really seem like she needed help, like she needed her sidewalk shoveled, but there wasn't much snow on it. And what I realized over time, later in life, stupidly, was that Mrs. Anderson really didn't need someone to shovel her driveway or to take her garbage out, back to the alley. She needed somebody to talk to. She was a widow. She was very isolated, and so she called down to the parish office to ask if Chris and Bill were available, and yeah, we were probably available to come and help on these tasks because she really didn't need, again, somebody to rake her leaves. She needed somebody to talk to. And so I think that's an example about how you can help. I think that for all of you, there's a Mrs. Anderson out there in your life right now, but they come in all shapes and sizes. It might not be an elderly widow who needs help. It could be a sibling. It could be your neighbor. It could be somebody right here in your school. But you're capable of doing that, and you should look for those opportunities. I don't suggest you do it like I did it, because I didn't do it voluntarily, and I didn't recognize how important it was. But I think that's what we're talking about when men and women give their lives in service of this country. Down the chain, there are things that we can do to honor that gift and move it forward. And not just get together once a year to remember. Again, that's important, but we have to do more than just think about it for one day a year and then leave. So I'd encourage all of you to look. You might think, well, what talents do I have? Why would somebody need my help? Trust me, they do. If there's a person, Mrs. Anderson, who needed help from someone like me, like I was in high school, I have to believe that there's someone who needs your help out there. And so I appreciate all of you listening today. I hope you will take a moment. The takeaway is to remember today, but also to take action throughout the year to honor that gift and pay it forward. So we get generations and generations who continue to pay it forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks again, Captain De La Forest, for sharing his message this morning. Before Lars Ordsen and Ella Olson perform taps this morning, I would like to welcome up Aria Olson and Riley Bouchard to share a brief history of the famous melody.
On any given day at Arlington National Cemetery, a military ritual occurs that is both familiar and moving. An escort of honor comes to attention and fires 3 volleys. After the briefest of moments, a bugler then plays the 24 notes of America's most famous bugle call. The flag, held by members of the Military Honor Guard, is then folded into a triangle reminiscent of a hat from the American Revolution. This ceremony is performed almost 20 times daily during the many funerals held at Arlington.
Of all the military bugle calls, none is so easily recognized or more apt to evoke emotion than the call taps. This melody is both eloquent and haunting, while the history of its origin is somewhat clouded in controversy. In the British Army, a similar type of signal called last post has been sounded over, but the music and use of taps is unique to the United States military, since the call is sounded at funerals, wreath-laying ceremonies, and memorial services. It is a bugle call that beckons us to remember patriots who served in our country with honor and valor. At this time, 8th graders Ella Olson and Lars Ordsen will lead us in a performance of taps. Please stand.
You may be seated.
Thank you. As we close this morning, it is my hope that the musical selections, message, and readings have encouraged a greater appreciation and understanding of why we celebrate Memorial Day. I also hope that you have learned or been reminded of how important it is for us all to take a moment and observe those who have sacrificed so much in order for us to live freely. And as our message indicated today, that gift, right? Thank you, students, for your attention this morning. As our 8th grade band plays, we will dismiss by section. And at this time, for our 6th and 7th grade students, you're allowed to transition to your day 1 first period class. Thank you.
American Declaration. Pump to get up, pump to get up, pump. White and white and 2 and red. want one group picture. Everybody sit up tall, put your instrument up on your right knee. Percussion, stand still. I'm going to do one of those panel pictures.